This first video we're going to look at is called the Complete Fill Brow, or the Classic Brow, or it's the traditional brow. It's what it's what people think about when they think of basic brow. What we do is we find their perfect shape and we fill it in. The people that this brow is good for would be the person who has most of their hair and it's just kind of missing in some spots, or it's a light color, but they have all their hair and they just need a little bit of a light color in the background. You could find a very nice shape and fill it in, and it'll be just exactly what they need. It'll heal kind of powdery, but it is still different than the new powder brow of today. Another reason why this is good for a client is maybe they aren't sure where to tweeze their other hairs, their additional hairs that are outside of the shape. Having a complete fill brow allows them to see, where their shape kind of is and where it's not, and so when they can tweeze the hairs that don't fall inside that shape, then it'll be easy to see which ones to tweeze out without over tweezing. So what we're looking at here is a practice skin, and this will be the first one that you do. You're going to take that plastic measuring thing. You can use that for every practice skin you do, and you can also use it on your model. You can sterilize it and wipe it down and reuse it. But what we're going to do is find the center of the person's nose and mark it. Then, as you can see, when you lay that roller out flat, it has points on it like A, B, and C. We're going to find those points on this practice skin, and we're going to measure, and we're going to make sure that each dot is the same on one side as it is on the other. So for instance, the very first front lines that you see is in position A, and then the dots out towards the arch is position B. Usually most brows will fall in between number 6 and 7. So for our practice purpose, go ahead and put your dot right in between 6 and 7. But make sure that wherever you put it, it's exactly in the same spot on the other side. So then we want to do the lower part of the brow. So we're measuring, we want each part of the front brow to measure exactly the same. You don't want one beginning brow part on one side to be too thin and then the other side be too thick. So they have to be the same width at the front. That's where I measured with the ruler there. So now we're connecting our B arches right here, A to B, and it goes slightly just above it and then down to C. Then we're going to take the lower part of A, come up, but not all the way to B, just right where it's below B. Then we begin our descent to C. The C dot is exactly level to the lower part of the A dot. Let's do it again on this side. The top of the A dot, right over the B dot, heading down towards the C dot. I pretend that there's a star there, and I tell my students to reach for the star at the end. So you're aiming, you're inclining towards the B dot, and right before you hit, then go ahead and angle over towards the C. Now we have brows that look or measure the same on each side. Sometimes you'll have a client who wants the front part of their brows to be very up and down and boxy looking. Some people like it very rounded. Some people like it to go up and then go over. So you'll have to be mindful of the client and ask them what their preferences are and have examples to show them too. For this complete fill brow method, I'm trimming the squared off edges off to make it look more rounded. And so what I'm going to do, because I'm going to pretend that this client wants a rounded beginning. So we're gonna soften the edges, and then we're gonna fill in everything that's inside of that shape there. So now we have nice rounded edges, but they're the same size rounded edges, and that's what's important. So now we dip our, we know how to set up our needle, and we begin to, with our machine, dip it in the ink, and we're going to dot around the perimeter of our ink. This method is great because when you go to wipe off this pigment, you'll still be able to see where the outline of your shape is. It won't be too dark, but it won't be so light that you can't see it. And that's really great because then you don't have to fuss with, extra items like a Sharpie marker or a wax pencil or anything like that. You keep it simple and keep it, without any extra items to get in the way or drop, so ultimately this keeps it more sterile and clean. So right there I used a little bit of you can use olive oil or you can use some hand sanitizer gel, and I just rub all that ink around to get it off the pigment skin, the practice skin. And then we're going to dip a little cotton ball into some water, wring it out really well, and it'll all just wipe off. And then you dry it off. Sometimes you don't even need to use the cotton ball, the water. You can just, after you wipe it down with that Germ-X, you can just use your cotton ball and it'll all just wipe off. And so we've made our dots around the perimeter of both of the shapes. And this is actually this is what I do on my live models too. The only difference being that instead of Germ-X or olive oil, I'm wiping it off with numbing, topical numbing, like your blue gel. That blue gel is wonderful. It helps to get the pigment like that. It looks like it's a stain there. That's how it really works on skin too. And if you look real close, you can see a bit of the perimeter there. So in person you can see that even better. Anyway, I was saying about the blue gel, that will help to, if you rub it around in circles like that, it'll get it off the person's skin, and then it's easy to wipe off. Otherwise it just kind of makes this like stained mess on their face. Of course it will come off in time, but it makes for better presentation in an after picture when it's nice and neat and clean. So some of the dots you can't really see, so I'm just going to go ahead and go over them to make them a little bit more visible. And then using an oval motion, we're just going to fill that in. Almost like if you're using a colored pencil to color in a shape on a piece of paper. You're just literally coloring it in. And this is what we call your first pass. So once you get this all covered in and you want to see it all saturated completely, then you can wipe it off, see how much was in there, and you'll see that not too much will get in on your first pass. Most practice skins, as well as people, will need about 5 passes to get it to a perfect and complete saturation. But this is really good for the practice, so you can see what it is really like to measure perfect brows out. We call that mapping or designing a brow. And then going through the motions over and over again. So if you thought that you were doing it wrong because you spent all this time putting in this perfect brow, and then when you wiped it off there's nothing there, you're not wrong. You just needed to do it 4 more times. And what's great about that is, let's say you accidentally made a stroke that you're not in love with. Well, when you go to do your next pass, simply don't reinforce that one stroke that you don't like, and it probably will be the first thing to fade out on that person. So don't panic. And when it comes to these front part, I usually don't go so solid. I usually just kind of tap it in there so you don't have such a harsh brow beginning. And so then you're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, and you'll see it's going to be a lot of the back and forth, back and forth. So I'm going to sign off here and let you continue to watch this and see what kind of tips that you pick up. You may have to watch this a couple times and do it a couple times on your practice skin. If you'd like to order more practice skins, there is a catalog, a supply catalog in your folder that says Easy Permanent Makeup Supplies. This particular skin